Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we're talking about one of my all-time favorite spring power fishing techniques. We are talking spinnerbait fishing. I've got some underwater footage for you, and I've got some subtle nuances that will make a huge difference when you throw a spinnerbait this spring. Spinnerbaits have stood the test of time. For most of us, it was one of the first baits that we ever picked up or saw on TV when we got interested in bass fishing. The spinnerbait is just one of those proven fish catching baits. Now, with that said, they seem to have almost fallen by the wayside. The chatterbait definitely had something to do with that. The huge explosion in vibrating jigs definitely took the limelight off of spinnerbaits. But it's more than that. If you talk to a group of anglers, there will be somebody in that group who swears that a spinnerbait is the greatest bait of all time, right? One guy will say, one of these right here, be it a shad color, be it a chartreuse and white, a spinnerbait is their all-time favorite technique. And then you talk to somebody else, also a great bass fisherman, and that guy will say, man, I can't catch anything on a spinnerbait. I have no confidence in it. I can be on fish. I tie that spinnerbait on, I can't get bit. So how can that be? How can it be that in every group of anglers, there's somebody who loves them and somebody who can't buy a bite on them? Obviously, there's something to that. Today, we're covering what that is. And I'll tell you right now, what that is subtle little nuances. The difference between a guy who can catch them and a guy who can't buy a bite is the little details. And that's why underwater footage is so important in this video today. What I want to do is I've got, a dozen or more spinnerbaits laid out here, some trailers, some trailer hooks. But the big thing that I want you guys to understand is that no two spinnerbaits from any two brands, any two models are created equal. Every single spinnerbait behaves differently underwater. And that is what people miss. That's why one guy can be crushing them and another guy cannot buy a bite. That's why one guy has one or two baits in his box and never catches anything. Or maybe one day he had a great day and then he's never been able to repeat it. And another guy will be out of his mind like me and have boxes and boxes and boxes of spinnerbaits. It's because they're all different. So some of the subtleties, okay? Obviously there's different blade types. I'm not even going down that road today. I'm just gonna tell you right up front, double willow is my favorite. As I travel around the country, I spend 99% of my time throwing double willows. The reason why is that I believe double willows best imitate the sound of shad in the water. And most places that you go, not all, but most places that you go when you're throwing a spinnerbait, you're shad imitating. So I spend most of my time with double willows. There's still a place for other blade types, but we're just gonna leave that right there. But other differences, things that make all the difference in the world that you could overlook, blade thickness. See, this blade, stiff as a board. Check out this one. Where's a River to Sea? This is a Bling by River to Sea. Look at this blade. I can just bend it. It's paper thin. The result is that this bait can go extremely slow and the blades will keep turning, even when you're going way slower than other baits. Other differences. Let's go back to this. See the length of this skirt? Some spinnerbaits will have a short skirt. Some will have a longer skirt. Some will have long strands in the mix. But here's the biggest thing that virtually everyone overlooks. That is that every spinnerbait rides differently in the water. What I mean is that one spinnerbait will come through the water completely flat. The next spinnerbait will come through the water tipped so far back. These are inline blades. It's riding through the water like this. And the skirt is way up here with the hook hanging out the bottom. And all the other baits will ride somewhere in between. Now, none of these baits are kicked way, way, way back. The baits that are kicked that far back, I don't like them. I don't like them at all. I can't catch fish on them. And it would not surprise me if the bait in your box that you can't get bit on, if you actually stuck your head underwater, you would find out that that thing is coming through the water all the way back here, like that. And these blades are back here spinning. Now, some of these baits, a couple in particular, sit part way back. One is going to be that river to sea. If you see it in the water, the hook is slightly below the skirt. The other one is the Damiki. This guy right here, the TOT. This bait also slightly back. Interestingly enough, those are two of my favorite all-time spinnerbaits. Now, I've got 4 or 5 favorites, to be fair, but these are 2 of them. So here is the difference. These baits, when they're kicked back, they're not kicked way, way back. They're kicked part way back. And when they're back there, if you throw it without a trailer on it, without some sort of a swim bait on the back of it, that bait is sitting back there fighting the blades. It's actually walking as it comes underwater. Now, most of my spinnerbaits I throw with trailers on them. The reason why, well, it's twofold. One is that it stabilizes the baits. It will help them run right. And 2, and most importantly, is that if you're throwing a spinnerbait, now this applies the most in murky water, okay? But it applies all the time. If you're throwing a spinnerbait, let's take this bright guy right here as an example, and I'm throwing this in muddy water. It's springtime. We get storms. So yesterday the water's clear. Today it storms. Tomorrow I have muddy water. My fish are up shallow, right? We're all the way into April. The fish I want to chase around are up shallow. So I know that come tomorrow, muddy water, I can pick up a spinnerbait and I can go dirt shallow. The spinnerbait, the beauty of a spinnerbait is they're unbelievably weedless. People don't realize how far back in the stuff you can throw a spinnerbait, especially if you throw it with a swim bait. Now, if you throw it with a trailer hook, they'll snag up occasionally. With just a swim bait on the back, I am not afraid to throw a spinnerbait right over the top of lay down trees, and I mean in the woods, and just start slow rolling. The arm itself coming up to those blades is an incredible weed guard. It keeps that bait snag free. So I'm able to fish these incredibly shallow, deep in cover, where I would normally have to throw a jig or a Texas rig, something like that. I can put a spinnerbait in there. Now, in that muddy water, what the fish target first is the vibration. They feel the vibration coming off the blades. That is why all of my painted blade spinnerbaits, which is what I throw when it's muddy, all of them are full-size spinnerbaits. See, I have what I would call 3 sizes. You've got full size, you've got mid-size, and you've got finesse. See the blade size difference there? Let's set those down. Great big giant willow, medium willow, tiny little willow. So when it's muddy, I spend all my time on those full size frames, big spinnerbaits. The fish feel the blades, they feel the vibration, and that's what they're coming for. They can't actually see it. It's not until they get close that they see the color. Dayglow orange, white, chartreuse. That's where I spend my time. Now, I'm not one of those guys who throws a lot of bold chartreuse. If I'm throwing chartreuse at all, it's mixed in with white. This is called Nashville Sexy. It's a white chartreuse blue. That's about as chartreuse as I get right there. And even then, the back sides of my blades are unpainted. So I get flash too. Typically, I'm either going early spring, I'm going day glow, hunting giants. The rest of spring, I'm throwing white on white. That's what I like in muddy water, personal preference. So as those fish are coming in, they see the blades. Right when they get there, they see those blades and they hit them. If I have a swim bait on there, there's one. So they're coming for the blades. But if they get there and they're about to strike and they see a full swim bait profile, the odds are much greater that they eat the bait instead of the blades, because when they get there, it looks right. So almost all of my spinnerbaits have a swim bait trailer on them because my hookup ratio is way higher. I don't get short strikes. I used to have fish that would eat the blades, eat the blades, eat the blades. And I'd have to hang great big hooks off the back and they'd eat the blade and that hook back there would stick them right at the base of the chin. Sometimes it wouldn't even be in the mouth. It'd be right here because they'd come up, they'd eat the blade and then that would get them on the underside of the chin. See that? That's how that would happen. The swim bait has resolved all of that for me. Now, the vast majority of the time, if I get bit on a spinnerbait, I get them. Now, there are exceptions, and this is what I want to talk about. Here's those subtle nuances. We're not just talking about blades, how thick are the blades, although that was an interesting thing. I hope you saw that again. For years, I've said the bling is one of my favorite baits. Find me another one that does that. And if you find one, you found another excellent, slow-rolling spinnerbait. But we're not just talking about blades. Let's back up and let's talk about that angle again. And then we're going to start talking about baits that don't need trailers. In fact, you should not put trailers on them. Because again, this is about subtle nuances. Baits that should get a trailer, okay? My number one trailer over the years has been a Kitech. And I'm gonna be the first one to tell you, specifically on a full-size bait, a 4.3 Kitech. That's what that is right there. That's the right size. If you go with a 4.8, that tail will come around a lot and get caught on that hook. And that's what you get when you reel it back to the boat. A 4.3 eliminates almost all of that. That's why a 4.3 is the deal. So I have caught countless fish on a spinnerbait with a 4.3 Kitech. I'll just flat out say that. Now that said, I've always known it wasn't the perfect trailer for the job. And I have forever been looking for better options. Now, why do I say that? It's because the Kitech has such a wide kick. Underwater, it doesn't necessarily match the blades. It doesn't look perfect. It looks good enough. I catch a pile of fish on them, and I'll just tell you that. So if you just need a trailer, you probably have Kitechs in your boat already, grab and go. But I'm always looking for perfection. So this one, as an example, this is a Nichols, okay, 1/2 ounce. Look at how this looks underwater with the Kitech on the back of it. You see how it kind of swims out of line. That tail just isn't perfect. Now, a bait that has more resistance is the Storm, the Largo Shad. So look at this guy. Now we're talking still same exact bait, now different color, obviously, but we're still talking 1/2 ounce Nichols, but we've put a 4-inch Largo Shad on the back of it. That bait has more resistance, but it's also a much tighter action. Look at the difference it makes in that bait. Same exact spinnerbait. One looks a little funky, but believe me, it will still catch fish. But look how good the other one looks. Huge difference, just by changing the trailer. So 3 trailers that I've spent a lot of time with. One is going to be the Kitech, that's a given. The other one is that Largo Shad. I've been spending a ton of time there. The other one is this Demiki, the 4-inch Armor Shad, both 4-inch, okay? 4-inch Armor Shad. The Armor Shad is sort of between these two. So if you go to a lighter weight spinnerbait, say a 3/8 or even lighter, the Largo Shad is too much resistance, it's too much vibration, and that bait will roll off center. It won't track true. Okay, so that's where that armor shad comes into play. So the lighter I go armor shad or Kitech. The heavier I go, Largo shad, period. That's just been the best one I can find so far. Now, let's jump to little guys, okay? Because we've talked those full size, mid-size, sort of self-explanatory. Take a Damiki. The larger Damiki, a 1/2 ounce Damiki, is pushing a full-size spinnerbait, although it still has mid-size blades. But it's interesting, the Damiki is one of the few where if you go down to a 3/8, it's actually a completely different size bait. So the 3/8 is definitely a mid-size and almost a finesse spinnerbait. Okay, so why would you go down to a mid-size or a tiny spinnerbait? It has to do with the size of the bait fish in the water or water clarity. The clearer the water, the more likely that I'm going to downsize my spinnerbait. Also, if I'm physically looking in the water and I see little bait fish, why on earth would I be throwing this when I could be throwing this? I already know the bait fish are tiny. Which blade looks more like them? Right, it's very simple. It's not complicated at all as you decide what size to throw. You're trying to match what you're seeing out there in the water. Otherwise, if you can't see anything in the water, the muddier the water, I go full size, I go bold, I go painted blades. The clearer the water, I go all shad, ghost type colors, very subtle colors, and very small blades. And I get more bites doing that. And we'll get into the how and the when to throw these here in a second, but let's continue down this path. So with the little spinnerbaits, there's the little Largo shad, and there's smaller Kitechs. The heavier the bait, same rules apply. The more I will put a Largo shad on. If you get, say, a 1/4 ounce Z-Man, this guy right here, if I put a Largo shad on it, he'll swim crooked. But if I put a Kitech on it, it tracks perfectly. So the lighter the weight, the more I'm gonna lean to that Kitech. The heavier the weight, the more I'm gonna lean to that Largo shad. Again, more vibration, pulling back, it's resistance, it causes that bait to want to turn. But when you get them balanced right, you put a Largo shad on like a little Largo shad on a 3/8 little tiny finesse spinnerbait, and it looks so good. They track dead flat. And again, remember the difference. We already saw that Nichols where the Kitech is looking kind of funny. We put a Largo shad on, that bait looks perfect. It's all about those subtle differences. Don't be afraid to play with them. Now, let's talk about spinnerbaits that we're not going to put a trailer on at all. And then we'll circle back and we'll talk about where and how I'm throwing these, because that is obviously a major part of spring fishing, is knowing when to do it. And I'm not even standing here saying, hey, this is one of my favorites. That's one of, I guess I said that a couple times, but I'm not going deep into these baits. Every bait that I have out here today, be it a Damiki, a Nichols, a full-size War Eagle, Megabass SV3, little Z-Man, the little Nichols. What else is out here? The Blade Runner. One of my favorites, again, Terminator P1. These are all baits that I throw a ton. I throw them all in slightly different circumstances, okay? So in the video description, today's video is going to be a little funny. I'm going to link them all for you. But what I'll try and do is, maybe the way we'll have to structure this is I'm gonna say favorite full-size spinnerbait, no trailer. Favorite full-size spinnerbait with trailer. Favorite mid-size spinnerbait, no trailer. I think that's how we'll structure this. And I'll just give you my personal favorites and then like 2 or 3 of my favorite colors for each one. I think that's probably the only way that I could structure this in a way that makes sense. And then I'll link the swim baits for you as well. So circling back, let's get back to talking about baits that don't need trailers, okay? So as you're looking at a spinnerbait on the shelf, if you want a little shortcut, if it has an extra long skirt, so see that War Eagle, see how long these tails are? How about this SV3? Here's a couple of them. See those SV3s? See, it's got these 4 down here that are thicker and longer. Let's see who else. That's the bulk of it for these. Those longer cut skirts, they're designed to be fished with or without a trailer. Now you can take an SV3 and you can put a trailer on it and it looks all right. It really does. It looks fine with a little Kitech on the back there. About a 3.3 Kitech, maybe a 3.8 Kitech, because again, we're talking about a small spinnerbait. It looks fine, but it looks better with no trailer at all. And again, subtle differences, right? When it has no trailer on it at all, I can work it and pop it, and I can actually get that bait to move. So say I'm swimming along a piece of cover. In my mind, the fish is already looking at it. I can pop that bait, and all of a sudden, that fish will eat it. So I can draw a little bit of a reaction strike. The larger the trailer on the spinnerbait, the more you're gonna spend your time just slow rolling it. I still work them and pop them a little bit, but without a trailer, they move a lot more. They're a lot more aggressive. So some of these baits, specifically that SV3 or that War Eagle, truly look better with no trailer on them at all. So let's talk about trailer hooks, because if there's no trailer at all, we come back to that age-old problem of short strikes. So generally, I just tell people, if this was not an in-depth video, I would just say, put a swim bait on there, call it a day. That's my short answer. If you bump into me in a tackle store somewhere and you say, hey, should I put a swim bait on the back of a spinnerbait? I'm gonna say yes. I'll probably even just grab a 4.3 Kitech and say, day in and day out, put this on there, you will catch fish. Now, if you have some more specific questions, all of a sudden we're gonna be pulling Largo shads off the shelf. We're gonna be looking for a Demiki. We're gonna be talking about different blades. But short answer, stick a Kitech on there, go, you will catch fish. But if you're throwing one of these baits without a trailer, do yourself a favor, put a trailer hook on there, or a stinger hook on there. Now, traditionally we use this style, and these are great. So these are poured. They pour this little bit of black rubber or plastic or whatever it is over that eye. See that? So what I do is I just take my spinnerbait and I just stab it through there. And it acts as its own keeper. See, it's rigid. It stays. So that's great. See, now that, set up like that, it's still mostly hidden within the skirt. So if it's in the water and that skirt's straight, which this one is coming through the water, a War Eagle lays back perfectly flat, then that hook is mostly hidden. But when those fish take a shot, let me hold that big blade straight back. When they take a shot at that blade, I'm hooked. It's got me. So it makes a huge difference. Now, this is a very different hook. I got my hands on these last fall. What do they actually call them? Gamakatsu G-Power Tournament Grade. The G-Power Stinger Trailer is what that thing's called. It's a crazy looking hook. It's got a bend to it. Funny things get me. Things that are different get me. Those are the things that catch my attention. So I had to try it. That bend intrigued me. Well, sure enough, I put it on here. It is perfect on any of these little finesse spinnerbaits. That's its deal. So on an SV3, on that little Nichols, that's that little 33, on the little, I've made a mess of it now, on the little Z-Man, if you need a trailer there. That little guy, this is a size 1. That other one, that was a 3/0. This is a little size 1. See how well it sits in there? Yes, it can swing, but it naturally rides. Even with a bend in it, it naturally rides straight. When I pull, it's not going up or down. It's straight. And then it comes with this little ball keeper that you slide on after it, and it holds it there. That little hook is so perfect, and I've never seen a better hook to put on an SV3 or any other finesse spinnerbait. I just don't think there is a better hook. It's completely lost inside that skirt. But when they eat it, it's got them. In fact, both hooks just got me. Deadly little hook. It's really cool when these companies are doing different things. After all this time, they're making subtle changes that are completely changing spinnerbait fishing. One of the most traditional techniques in bass fishing. I think that that is an awesome, awesome little hook for fishing on your smaller spinnerbaits because you're still keeping it subtle. It's not overpowering, it's not messing up the bait, it's not creating drag, it's not sticking way out there trying to snag on every tree you go by. It's a great little option. Now, let's talk more generalizations about spinnerbaits, okay? Overcast days like this, I don't want a ton of flash. So, see this guy here, this Nichols, it's got this mylar in it, these strands that are super flashy. It also has the blade that has that actual texture to it. It's a scaled blade. This blade in the sunlight has so much flash, it's crazy. It's reflecting back from the surface of the water. It has that much flash. Well, have you ever seen shad when they're up shallow and they're rolling around not paying attention? They throw so much light. Perfect imitator. One of my favorite colors. On a sunny day, cloudy like this, that much flash is not natural at all. The natural world goes pretty dull on a cloudy day. There's not a lot of reflection. So you could still throw silver blades, but something like one of these, just straight silver blades. Or, and these get me every time. Where's that little 33? I have fallen for these since I was a kid. Now I've fallen for them for good reason. Painted blades, or in this case, dipped blades, but I'm not talking white blades or chartreuse blades or tiger stripe blades. Dipped in glitter. Boy, that last one did get me. I'm bleeding. It's all good. Just glittered blades. Man, I will fall. I have boxes of these things because I've been falling for them since I was a kid, but they work. So those overcast days go into dipped blades, whether they're dipped like this or, you know what, I'm gonna dig in here. This box. Let me show you another one. The guy who's, maybe you're down south, maybe your fish eat bluegill. They don't eat shad. They're like watermelon black flake dipped blades. Oh man. Here's another one. Let's do this one. Look at this one. It's like a dark watermelon with mixed color sparkle in the blades. Man, blades that look good, really good, but they're not particularly reflective. Perfect on a cloudy day. Now, muddy water on a cloudy day, whites, chartreuses, dayglow orange. Muddy water on a sunny day, same exact thing. Bright, bold colors. Muddy water on a sunny day, but the mud is clearing, so it's becoming murky water. I go to gold blades. Where's an example? Here's one. And I don't typically go gold on gold. I typically go one silver, one gold. That gold just shines better in muddy water than silver does. So that's the transition between silver, clear water, bright painted, muddy water, gold, the murky water in between. If you have tannic water, either gold or painted blades. And that's full time. If you have really dark tannic water, gold or painted blades are the deal. Now, bright sunny days, crystal clear water. Can a spinnerbait still work? Absolutely. But you want wind or you want to be fishing early and late. If you get bright skies, heavy wind. So say it's blowing 20 miles an hour on your lake. A spinnerbait can be lights out, and I will go right there. As much flash, scale, mylar, still super shaddy, super natural, but as much flash as possible in that high wind. Those waves, if you've ever been underwater with big waves going, there's so much turbulence. There's light refracting everywhere, and it's completely natural for that bait to be throwing a ton of flash. The calmer the water, the more subtle you want to go. The more windy, the more flashy and aggressive you want to go. Spinnerbait fishing is not complicated. Granted, we just went down 14 different rabbit holes at once, and I made it as complicated as possible, but not on purpose. The reason I did that is I want you to understand that if you're the guy who doesn't catch them on a spinnerbait, it's not you, it's your bait selection. This is one of those categories where every bait is different and the little details make a huge, huge difference. That's why I'm going to link these baits in the description, and I'm just going to stick with my favorites for different categories, because you don't need the ones for every single category. Just find the one that's most like you. Clear water. Okay, here's a bait or two. Focus on that. You've seen the underwater footage now. If you saw one that just stood out to you, maybe it was that Nichols with a Largo shad on the back of it. 1/2 ounce Nichols, Largo shad, 4-inch, and go fishing. Because you just watched how it completely stabilizes that bait. The tail of the Largo shad matches the blades on that bait, and they just look right. You know that will catch fish. As opposed to that spinnerbait that's been in your box forever, that maybe it comes through the water like this, and you had no idea. All you know is you can't catch fish on it. Guys, there are subtle nuances in almost every aspect of bass fishing. Spinnerbait fishing is another one of those places that I'm super, super passionate about. I really enjoy throwing a spinnerbait. Pre-spawn, I love throwing them dirt shallow, targeting those fish, especially when I get mud flows, because I know they're up in there. Spawn, it slows down for a week or two. Then as soon as I've got post spawners, I start thinking shad spawn. And we'll get into that a lot more, probably a few weeks down the road, when that really becomes a player here on our home lake. After your bass are ending the spawn, shad begin to spawn. And what happens is first thing in the morning, shad are spawning dirt shallow. They typically do it on hard banks. So they're going to be on, shell bars, long tapering points that don't have grass on them, up against rock. Hard bottom is where shad spawn. They get right up shallow, and they'll be up there rolling around first thing in the morning. Bass know it. Post-spawn bass are on them, and it can be ugly for 2-3 hours in the morning, and then the shad spawn will fade out. Next morning, it'll happen again. It's a first light thing. The spinnerbait is one of the major post-spawn players when you're chasing that shad spawn. It is my favorite way to target the shad spawn. I love it. I love throwing a spinnerbait late April into May. It's just a riot. So 2 completely different ways to fish a spinnerbait. Dirt shallow around cover versus covering water, just trying to pluck those fish off. But both incredibly effective, and both part of the reason that I love spinnerbait fishing so much. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. I didn't even get into rods. My goodness. I mean, this is a giant category. But my favorite rod of all time for it is, of course, one of those G. Loomis MBRs. I talk about MBRs all the time because they can do so many things. The 844 MBR. I'll link my favorite one in the video description, but just an amazing high-end rod for spinnerbait fishing. Other than that, you can kind of get away with a medium or medium heavy rod. You really can. Again, depending on the size of the spinnerbait, you can decide medium or medium heavy. But it's just a jig hook, and you can set that with a lot of rods. But there's still perfect rods that really help when you're trying to pulse and work that bait. Again, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.